In this video, we're going to look at how to build the wheel and axle utilizing Vex components in Autodesk Fusion. With this, we've already got all of our components already added into our project folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an untitled design file be open, and I'm going to insert a base plate by right-clicking on the file name and selecting Insert into Current Design. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this plate down by 90 degrees and then go ahead and select OK. Moving to the browser, I'm going to right click on the component name and select Pin, so that way we pin this and we're not able to move and drag this plate around. We're going to go ahead and add in a steel chassis rail as an upright. We're going to right click and select Insert into Current Design. With this, I'm going to go ahead and drag this up, and I want to go ahead and rotate this around, so that way not only do we have the upright, so 90 degrees, but I'm also going to rotate it around so that way the large flat edge is going to be to the outside. So you can kind of see the orientation, see how the tabs are. Should match what you have there on your screen. I'm going to go ahead and select OK. I'm going to run the joint command. I'm going to rotate down below to look at the face of the chassis rail. I'm going to zoom in here. Placing my cursor on the face of that, you're going to notice that in the opening of this rectangular kind of slot or opening in the panel of this piece, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hold the control key, or if you're on a Mac, you're going to hold the command key, and you're going to move right to the center, and when you do, I'm going to click to select that point. So then I'm going to go ahead and just click on the home button to bring us back to the top part of the plate, and I'm going to go ahead and find a spot here, and just a random hole would be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe click, we'll do about maybe 4 holes in from the edge, and you'll notice that if you keep my cursor on the plate face, I can go ahead and click on and see where the origin is. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to offset it over by about 0.1 inches. So if you're rotating around, you're going to see that roughly that should be right in the center. So where we're at. That offset will allow us to do that. I'm going to go ahead and select OK. While we're here, and just kind of thinking about how you would build this with Vex components, let's go ahead and add in a screw into this. So like when we go to build this component and build this into, actually with our Vex pieces, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to select Joint. I want to pick the circle right underneath the screw head, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate down just a little bit, and same thing as kind of what we did is I'm going to put my cursor on this face. I'm going to hold Command or Control and then select the center, and you're going to see that head is going to go in like that. If it comes in like this, then you just need to flip to be able to put that screw down in there. The next part is I'm going to rotate down below. Again, I'm holding down the Shift key and clicking my mouse wheel and moving my mouse to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and add in a Keps nut. So we're going to go ahead and put a Keps nut in here. If I grab the little circle in the middle, I can free move it. And I actually need to rotate this around a little bit so that way I can see the face on the inside. I'll go ahead and select Joint. I'm going to select this outside circle, as you see, and then I'm going to choose the end of the screw right here on the edge when you see the bolted outline. Again, I'm going to go ahead and flip this. It didn't quite come in the way I wanted to, but that's okay. And I can go ahead and offset this up into my panel. If I kind of rotate here, I'm going to get positioned, and I can kind of set, that's going to be too much. So if I zoom in a little bit more, 0.35 is going to probably work pretty well, or 0.37. Just again, this is just for a visual representation, but we'll have a screw and we'll have a nut that has this on there. To make this a little bit more steady, you might have to put more than one screw in this, and Keps nut, but for this visual representation, we're just going to go with one. So just in Fusion. Alright, now, many people would think, let's just go ahead and repeat the process for this all over again, just on another spot there. Actually, I'm going to hold off, and we're going to bring in, and we're just going to go ahead and bring in a bearing flat. I'm going to insert into the current design. And up here toward the top, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate around on this bearing flat. I'm going to select OK. And what we're going to do is we're going to select joint, and I'm going to select the circle on the top hole of this bearing flat on this side. And then here I want to go ahead and I'm going to select actually this top one like so. Now we are going to need to flip it, and if you look at kind of turn it toward the front or kind of look at it, you can also rotate it. We're going to need to offset this down by 0.1, so that way the holes will line up in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK. And now there's our bearing flat installed with a rigid joint. Now this is going to get a little bit messy, especially down here toward the bottom. You see all the little joint icons. So I'm going to go over here to the joints folder and click on the eyeball to hide it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to insert another screw. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around, and even rotate my screw around so I can see the underneath side of the head. Joint, select underneath the screw head, select the circle. If I need to flip it, all looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and use duplicate with joints, which you can also find in the assemble panel. And I can just choose the screw head, choose the next hole, and be good there. I'm going to rotate around. We're going to add in a Keps nut. And I'm actually going to rotate this so that way I can see that circle. Joint, select this outside edge, select this outside edge. If I need to flip, and then insert into about 0.15 would work just fine. And then I can duplicate with joints, select that Keps nut, select the end of this next screw head, and we put that together. Alright, for a visual representation as well, I'm going to go ahead and add in a spacer. So spacer is going to come in, and where we're going to put that spacer is it's going to be on the end with this circle. So when we go to put the shaft in, it'll go in through that particular hole. So what I'm going to do is, the reason why I've kind of set this up the way that I have is I'm actually going to go up here to create and go down to mirror. And it's going to ask me under the object type what kind I have. Usually by default it has bodies, but I want to go ahead and change this drop down and select components. Then I got to select what objects that I want. Well, and I'm going to use the browser to do that. You're going to see it's going to highlight when I select. I want the chassis rail, the screw that I put at the bottom, as well as the Keps nut, the bearing flat, the 2 screws, the 2 Keps nuts, and the spacer. I want to go ahead and copy or mirror those all across. And then when I go over here to my menu, I'm going to select a mirror plane. So I actually have to click on the word select in the menu. And when you notice, because I put this right at the origin, I can actually choose this work plane right here, and it's going to mirror everything over to the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and select OK. So that keeps me from having to redo a bunch of steps, and I just went ahead and copied everything over. So now here's the only hang up, is if I click and drag, these parts are not jointed, so the joints don't carry over when we mirror. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z, or if you're on a Mac it'd be Command Z, to bring that back to its original position. So I'm going to go up here to Assemble, and I'm going to use something called Rigid Group. And I'm going to go ahead and select the base part, and as I go along I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate down, and I want to grab the Keps nut and the screw to select. You'll notice it'll select them over here as well in the browser. I want to select this chassis rail, bearing flat, screw, the spacer, this screw. I'll rotate around, grabbing this Keps nut and this one as well. So what we're going to do is, when we say rigid group, we're going to say OK. And now if I try to click and drag on any of these, they're not going to move. So we just went ahead and applied them as part of a rigid jointed group that are all together. So now we can go ahead and get into our final steps. Let's go ahead and right click on the 12-inch shaft. We'll insert that into the design. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. And we're going to go ahead and joint the end of that shaft. And we'll go ahead and put it into the end of the spacer here. And let's look at it from the side. We'll go ahead and offset it by about let's go 3 inches, we'll say. We'll just kind of balance it out a little bit as much as we can. Now, in my joints folder, one thing I didn't do is I didn't apply the correct joint motion, so I'm going to open that joints folder, right click, select edit joint, and choose revolute, because that's going to spin inside of that bearing flat. Then I can go ahead and bring in my 5-inch traction wheel, insert it into the current design. So this is going to be actually our wheel, and I'm going to go ahead and joint, and then I'm actually going to choose on this wheel. You're going to see you can choose a circle or you can choose the arc. Depending upon which one you choose, it doesn't really matter as long as you get that joint origin right in the middle on that hole. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the circle on the end of the shaft here. And then what I'm going to do is offset this, so then that way that it is up here next to the spacer, and you can kind of see where that spacer is. It's going to be a rigid joint. We're going to select OK, and then what we're going to do is add on a rubber shaft collar. So in the first class lever, we played around with the metal shaft collars. There we go. And this one we're going to use rubber shaft collars, another type. I'm going to click joint. There's a little circular hole on this that I'll select, and I'll choose the same point on the shaft, and I'm just going to offset this until I get it in about the right position here, and that looks fairly good. Okay, time to repeat on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and add in a 4-inch traction wheel. This is going to represent our axle, even though they're both being used as a wheel. Even though they're both wheels being used, I should say. I'm going to go ahead and utilize this as kind of like the axle diameter. So I'm going to hover over the center portion. If I hold control, I can select the middle. Then I can go ahead and select the center for the shaft. So the way that this comes in, if, for example, so we want the circular edge to be flat like that. If it comes in like this, we actually want to flip it. So depending on which direction, if it comes in like this, you don't have to worry about flipping it. And we're going to go ahead and offset this onto our component here, onto our shaft. And I'll go ahead and select OK. And the same kind of thing, we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert a rubber shaft collar, just because they're a little bit differently spaced. A duplicate with joints is not going to work very well. So let's just go ahead and join a rubber shaft collar on, select the end, and then go ahead and bring that on. And we'll just offset that like that. Okay, and now if I close down the data panel, now we get a fully operating wheel and axle component that we can use to do our simple machine investigation with.